Today I'm going to show you how to take cocktail glasses from the thrift store and turn them into a one-of-a-kind table arrangement that is sure to impress your guests. Let's go play in the dirt together. Hi, I'm Carol, and today in the Handcrafted Garden we're going to do something really different. I have a friend who's getting married, and she's asked me to do the arrangements on the tables at her reception. And she wants it done in succulents. So I have this idea of planting succulents in little champagne glasses. And I didn't want to go buy a bunch of expensive champagne glasses, so I stopped at the thrift stores in town and I found these for less than $1 a piece. And they're actually etched on the side, so they're really unique. It's something she can give away as gifts as people leave the wedding, and so I'm going to make a series of 4 just to show you how I do it. And so let's get started. I have soil, and this is a very fine sifted compost with quite a bit of peat moss and a little bit of perlite, and I'm going to add more perlite because succulents don't by any stretch need to be sitting in damp soil. But even more so with this, because I'm using freshly cut succulents to plant in my champagne glasses. So this is something that's really unique and really important. So pay attention. When you cut a succulent, you damage the plant, and when you pull off a leaf, you damage the stem. And that damage is a little bit damp from the sap of the plant. And if you leave this sitting out on a table for about a week, sometimes 2, every one of these injured spots will grow a callus, and from that callus it will grow a root. And it can take a month or more for it to do that. And during that time, this plant lives on the moisture inside the leaves. So it can grow and live for a month or 2, sometimes longer, just sitting out in the open air, living on the moisture in the leaves of the plant. And this is a unique thing about succulents that make them so easy to propagate. So you can see it's mostly dry, it packs just a little bit. It's just a little bit of moisture in the soil that will get us over that barrier of the soil being hydrophobic. And so I want to just loosely put some soil in, and if I find a little stick that escaped, I'm just going to throw that out because I want the surface of the soil to be very pretty. And you can see it's almost to the top of the cup. I don't want to pack it. I want it to be very light. I want it to be flat on the top. And I'm going to set it right here in the middle of my... And now, after you get your soil in, you need to think about designing the plants you're going to put in. So you want to think about color. And this is a very yellow-green with an orange tip on it. And I can just sit that down in the soil, just like that. And you want it to sit all the way down into the soil until the first leaves are just barely touching the soil. And so I'm going to select another over here. This one's a bit smaller, but you'll notice it's exactly the same color pattern. The yellow-green in the center with the orange around the edges. And so this is on a nice tall stem, and it's got 4 shoots off of it, and I'm debating on whether I want to use all 4 of them or if I want to cut them up. And I think I want to cut them up because 4 is a little too much. So I'm going to do just like this. And I'm going to be able to prune these little stems to fit exactly like I want them to fit in this cup. And that's important. If I tried to take a plant with a root and put it in the cup, it's really gonna not be a good situation. Number one, because it's very crowded in the cup, and number two, because it has roots that have to be supported. So when I put a freshly cut stem in, the plant is in root growing mode, so to speak, and all of its energy is going into growing a root, and it stays a little bit dormant, maybe, while it's in that root growing mode. And it's going to give me a good month or longer to be able to care for the plants in this bowl quite easily. So I've got a nice little arrangement of 3, and I think I'm going to add one more. Some people think it has to be an odd number to be designed appropriately, and that's not really true. It just needs to be pleasing to the eye. So I've got a nice little arrangement here, and I'm thinking, do I want something dangling out of the pot, or do I want something standing up behind the pot, the cup? And I'm thinking I'm going to go with another one of these in the back. And so when you're designing your little cup, it's easy to move your plants around. It's one of the things that makes this kind of project so rewarding, because you can place it and take it back and place it again until you get it just exactly like you want it. And it doesn't harm the plants at all to do that. Now once I get all of my cups planted, I'm going to come back and put some greenery around the edges. I might put some Spanish moss or some rocks to cover up the soil around the edges, but I'm going to call this one good for right now in terms of having the plant situated. So the next cup, it's the same pattern on the side, but it's a little bit deeper. And so I'm going to do exactly what I did with the other one. I'm going to leave it very lightly packed. This one is ready to plant, and I'm going to do a little bit of a gray theme on this one. I have a nice little sedum here that's a gray-green with a little bit of a white edge around them. And if you're careful, these stems are very fragile, but if you're careful, you can just use your thumbnail to pinch off the bottom leaves, because you don't want to put the leaves under the soil. You want to damage that stem so that it can callus and grow some roots on it. Now, little sedums like this dry out much faster than larger varieties. And so be aware that if you put this in the dirt and you notice it wilting in a couple of days, you might need to water this one sooner than you would water the others. And wilting is a sure sign that the sedum has used up all the moisture in the soil, and it's time to have moisture coming up from the roots. So this one's going to stick up tall in the background. And I have another variety of sedum with a little bit larger leaf on it. It grows exactly the same way, but it's just a little bit larger. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just pinching off the leaves. Now with many succulents, you can actually let the leaves root and grow new plants, but with a sedum, their leaves will not root. So you can plan on just composting those. And I'm thinking with this one, I probably do need an odd number. I'm going to put one more like this on the side. which is this one. And it's got quite a bit of stem on it, and it's already calloused. You can see the little calluses where the leaves have fallen off. And I don't need that long stem. I'll put it right in the front. And I'm gonna bring the succulents in so they kind of come up into that little ghost plant. Just like that. Now I could fill this to overflowing with succulents, but I find that keeping it simple is often a better design technique, particularly when you have such a small space. I want to be able to see the soil around it. I want to be able to maybe put some moss around the edges. I'm going to leave that one just like that. I might decide to take these out. I haven't decided if I like them yet, but I'm going to think about that. Now this is the next one. This is a very tiny cocktail glass. So it's not going to take a lot of soil, and it's going to need to have some pretty small little plants in it. So let's see what I've got here. I got that one. And I think I'll use this. So we've got some gray and white with a little bit of pink going on for this one. And this has got quite a few little leaves on the bottom, and these leaves will grow a root. And if you want it to grow a root, you have to have an absolutely clean break. And you just lay it aside. And honestly, they can lay out on the cabinet for a month or more. That will callus, it will grow a root, and it will grow a tiny, tiny little plant. It is a very slow process, but you don't have to worry about it being in the soil and getting some moisture until you notice that little parent leaf starting to shrivel. So there's that. And this is a sedum as well, so I'm not going to collect these leaves. I'm just going to very carefully pinch them off. If you pull too hard, you just break the stem and you have to start over again. And I really want them touching. I want them really close to one another. And if I was planting this in a pot, I would never put succulents that close to one another because they need air circulation. Once they start growing roots and once they start becoming a mature plant, if they're very close to another plant, they'll actually rot. They need to have air circulation. But right now, they're focusing on growing a callus and growing a root, and they're actually trying to conserve the moisture inside the stem because they're surviving on that moisture. So you can have them really close in a situation like this, knowing that it's going to grow a root and you're going to remove it from this little cup eventually and put it in a pot and let it grow. Well, that one does not want to stick into the soil. There it goes. Now, if this was a specimen plant, I'd want it empty around the front and I'd want to see these growing up around the side, but because it's sitting in the middle of a table, I think I'm going to actually surround it with this little succulent because there's really not a front and a back in this little cup, so I'm not, my design is just a little bit different because there's not a front showpiece for this little container. Now what I found are a couple of stems where there are two little rosettes at the top, and so that's going to fit in really nice. It'll give it just a little bit of a different look. There it is. I'm going to set this one aside and I'll come back for some details. And this is my last container. So I have 4 different shapes of wine glass, champagne glass, cocktail glass, and martini glass, I think is what they are. And so what will this one be? This one I want to do something just a, well, okay. So what will this one be? I think I'm going to use some yellow sedum on this one. This is a very interesting little sedum. I buy it every year because it's too fragile to survive in the greenhouse during the winter. For whatever reason, I have not been able to make it happy. But you can see the tiny little roots coming off the stem. And what I'm going to do is make sure that this little stem is under the soil. This little stem right here. Now, I'll be honest, this little yellow sedum is going to be an experiment in this glass. And it's possible that it will not survive to make it to the wedding, but it's possible that it's going to do just fine. And the point is, I won't know till I try. So a lot, well, not a lot, but quite a bit of gardening is trial and error and finding out what makes a plant happy. So I'm going to bring back in this lime green with orange to go with this yellow sedum. And I'm going to need some on the other side too, so I'm going to get just a little more sedum. I'm going to get rid of the oak leaf. There we go. I'm just going to carefully snug it right up. And I'm just adding just a tiny bit of soil just to make sure that those little bitty fine roots get covered. And a point to remember, succulents have a very fragile root systems, and it's so easy to destroy them simply by packing the dirt around the root. And the same kind of thing is true for the leaves. They have very fragile stems and leaves, and it's really easy to just grab one and pick it up, not thinking, and have the leaves fall off in your hand. You have to handle it with kid gloves, so to speak. Just be very gentle and very careful as you're working with the succulents. So I'm going to move my dirt. I'm going to bring my 4 plants in. I'll have to clean off the bottom before I'm done. So here are 4 examples, and I have in mind that every cup is going to be different. And I have in mind that there may be 4 cups in the center of each table. And I might have a little bit of greenery or sticks or some kind of natural element to surround it, because they're going to be round tables with 8 chairs at each table. And so my thought now is, do I like the dirt looking through to see the dirt, or do I want to add a detail? And I've lost my detail. Here it is. So this is my edging material. I have some yellow-green Spanish moss, and I have some brown, it's actually shavings of wood, and I got this at our local hobby store. It comes in little bags. You can get different colors and different widths and different lengths. So one thing to do is to add this around the edge. And so my first thought as I try this is that this brown is just really too big and too clumsy to provide the look that I want. So definitely Spanish moss is going to do the trick. And luckily Spanish moss comes in some different colors. So, you know, if my lime green doesn't really accent my plant very well, I will run back down to the hobby store and get a color that does accent it, because some of these are gray and some of them are yellow green, and not all of them are going to blend really nicely with my yellow green Spanish moss. And so when you tuck it in the edges, you want your succulent to stand up so that you can see it over the Spanish moss. You don't want the moss covering it up. So I'm actually lifting these little bitty ones and tucking the Spanish moss under it. And you can tell that this is a tedious process. It's a time-consuming process, but it's one that makes the plant look really, really nice. So I'm not gonna make you watch me do it, but I am gonna point out how the Spanish moss can dangle over the side, and it just adds more interest to the glass. So the gray one, let's see how the moss looks on this gray one. Another option, if I decide I don't like the moss, is to use aquarium gravel. And you can get this, even at Walmart carries aquarium gravel. And you can get it in all different colors. And if I were doing aquarium gravel, I would do white. And in fact, I have some aquarium gravel. I just remembered that I did. Let me get that. I think this would look really nice with white. So this is the aquarium gravel, and I'm actually going to lift the plants a little bit out of the soil and put the gravel between the soil and the plant. And now that I've done this, I'm thinking white wedding dress, white gravel, yeah, that will really cause the succulents to stand out nicely. Now, one thing that's helpful if you're using gravel is a spoon or a tiny little scoop. And I'm not going to take a minute to go find my scoop. I'm just going to muddle through this one and let you see what it's going to look like. And so then I'm going to stand back and say, yeah, the gravel is much better than the moss. So I'm going to finish out these plants with gravel, and then I will come back and show you what they look like when they're all set. Thanks for playing in the dirt with me today. I'm Carol with The Handcrafted Garden, and I'll see you next time.